What is happening, everybody? Welcome to All Access Live with Kevin Rankin. If you have come here from any place other than YouTube, I want you to do me a favor. Open up another window, go over to youtube.com/@accesskevin, and I would love it if you subscribe to this channel. You'll find access to over 340 other episodes of amazing guests. If you so choose, you can become a member. That gets you exclusive access to some of the interviews that are not open to the public. Interviews with Kelly Kiki from Night Ranger back at his place in Phoenix. Nice interviews with Ginger Lynn at her place, and plenty more. But you can just do the free one. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like it. Share it with your friends. And it'll support my most amazing guest, 5-Star Guitars. If you're interested in playing guitar or bass like my next guest, and you're wanting to take lessons or get repairs done, get accessories, go to 5starguitars.com. They're based in Beaverton, Oregon, which means that there's no sales tax. So you're saving tons of dough. You're going to support an amazing organization that has been named the #1 music merchandiser of North America, which is going to be honored this week at the NAMM show. So if you don't know what the NAMM show is, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. It's an amazing convention down in Los Angeles in Orange County, where all the music merchandisers and product manufacturers and musicians get together and hobnob for a few days. And so it's an amazing time. I'll be down there tomorrow, going to do some live streams from there. Then next week, if you subscribe to the channel, you can take part in the conversation I have with Tommy Two-Tone. He's got a new record out, and Tommy and I go way back, done some a lot of shows together, actually. So that'll be fun. But my next guest, I got to see him play 36 years ago. It was late 80s in Montana, Billings, Montana. He's coming to me from Orange County. I've got Mr. Matt Bissonette. Matt, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm really, really well, man. Thank you.
36 years ago.
That's crazy, right? At that point, the Skyscraper tour, David Lee Roth was at the top of his game. Had Van Halen and actually made a bigger sort of splash for himself with the all-star band. Got to go, bro.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But we played that's where you lived in Montana. So
I drove 3 hours to go see it. I lived in Bozeman, Montana, home of Gibson guitars, acoustic guitars. But I drove to Billings, to Metra, to see you.
We were just there in Bozeman, and we Dave Amato went to that guitar store and spent a whole day buying stuff. So
right on, man. Yeah, well, growing up there in Bozeman, nothing really ever came through Bozeman, hardly at all, right? But they have a killer guitar shop, a killer music store, actually. Paul Decker, Music Villa is that shop, and took over from his pop. Paul and I graduated high school together. He took over this music store from his dad and really made like a world-class shop that John Mayer goes in there all the time and teaches guitar, to kids as he's checking out guitars. But so shout out to Music Villa.
Yeah, no kidding.
So if we talk about David Lee Roth, we talk about those days, man. You were out with your brother on drums. You had Greg Bissonette on drums. You had Steve Vai on guitar, right? And of course Dave, right? Who's when I had Rob Hammersmith yesterday as a drummer from Skid Row, and we talked about singers. They're on the hunt for a singer right now, and I was thinking about how the bravado that you need to have to front a band like that is so key. It's great to have the chops, but a guy like Roth, right? I mean, I would have thought that David Lee Roth would surround himself with guys that didn't quite shine so much, right? But because he was such a bright, shining light, right? But he armed himself with all-star cats like you guys. And I'm curious to know what that experience was like. Did you get free reign to do, like, to be yourself, or was he, kind of like dictating, all right, you guys, your job is to stand behind me until the spotlight's on you?
Right. Well, Dave is a very, very smart man, and I'm sure he knew at that time when Van Halen was breaking up. I mean, all eyes were on those guys and those two bands, and the media was turning them against each other, and there's all that fighting. And I still think to this day the whole thing was by design, just to make more money or do whatever, because it was, all eyes were on that situation. So I think Dave was real smart. He just didn't want to get guys that were yes men that would just do what he told because he needed help. Like any singer, he needs to have that stuff coming on. So when he got Steve and Billy and Greg, I mean, it was a gun show. I mean, those guys, I mean, it was just out of this world. The music was completely insane and it was just perfect for that time, you know.
Yeah.
And by the time I got in, they had already done one tour, and then I joined the band for the Skyscraper tour
Yeah.
and did more of the same, you know.
Yeah.
And then when Steve left, and we recorded the Little Ain't Enough record with Jason Becker, who was a great guitar player.
Hell
It
yeah.
was he, you know, he's like any smart singer knows that he needs the guys, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, it was the world according to Dave, and Dave had control over everything, and that was his thing. It's his prerogative. It's his band. So I mean, you kind of had your space, but I mean, I figured out pretty soon that there's like a line of expression and things, and you just, you know, you learn, and you know, as a drummer, you do the same thing. You know when you're gonna do things, and when you can just tell by looking at them
Yeah.
if you're doing your job. And that's bottom line of like Greg and I's philosophy of life is you just make whoever's paying you happy. You just
Yeah.
make them want to call you back, and to just make them want to call you back again, you know. And that's what we do, and that's what we try and do. So with Dave, I mean, Dave has pretty high standards to make happy,
Yeah.
you know, and rightly so. I mean, you know, so it was an experience. It was definitely, you know, because I grew up in Detroit, and kind of gravitated towards pop and jazz and different kind of things like that. So that kind of music for me was kind of a little bit of a stretch, and having to take Billy's place was like a whole other thing, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I've always had the unenviable spot of taking monster bass players play, like with Satriani. I had to take over for Stu when he left, Stu Ham. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, you know, and I'm a bass player, and I can play pretty good, but I'm not Billy Sheehan and I'm not Stu. But you
Yeah.
know, like Greg and I, we just say we just want to be really good at all styles so we can hang with anybody. That's kind of our thing. So I remember when Greg called me up and said, "Billy's leaving. Do you want to do this?" I actually had to think about it. I thought like I would just go, "Yeah, let's go." I mean,
Yeah.
I pondered it for a day, going, because I saw those guys play in Fresno. I took a buddy of mine up there to see it, and it was a freak show. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
Three ring
that
circus, man.
it was just out of control. And backstage, it was just a whole other world. And I'm kind of going, looking around, going, you know, this was like 2 years before they called me, going, man, I could never do this. So when Greg and Dave called me to do it, I had to really think about it. So, but then finally decided to do it. And like a half year later, I'm out there on the road going, what am I doing out here, man? I remember the first gig, because it was a big stink about Billy leaving and all his fans and everything. And it was kind of a tough spot to fill. But I remember the first gig, we did rehearsals. I can't remember where it was, but we played the first gig, and you hit that first monster chord, and then the lights are going, bah, and they go, you know, and Eddie Anderson, they would scream on the microphone, David Lee Roth. And I remember just going, I can't believe I'm doing this. And this is
Yeah.
just so surreal, because I was just playing with Sheena Easton's band before that. And it
That was
was
the
like,
gig prior. Okay.
yeah, that was my gig that I went to. It was doing, like, we were going to do Gino Vanelli, and uh, then I was working with Sheena Easton, and then got catapulted into this gig. And I remember the lights just going bizarre, crazy, and it all hit me. And the lights came on, and we started the first song, and I remember just going, God, get me through this, because I have no idea how this is going to go. Within
Yeah.
30 seconds of the first song, somebody threw a nunchuck at me from the crowd, one of those Chinese star things, you know,
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
kill people with. This thing came flying at me like, and I saw it like slow motion, and I went like this, and it stuck right in my bass strap, or my leather jacket, and it was going like like looking at me, and I'm looking at the star going, I'm gonna die out here, man. This is a lot to give up to do this gig. I'm gonna die out
Do you
here.
think it I mean, do you think it was because like you replaced Billy and that was kind of a heavy set
Well,
of shoes to fill? Or
that's what I'm thinking. Your
yeah.
mind just automatically goes to that in the panic, and you just kind of go, okay. And I just remember praying. I was like, God, please let this never happen again, because I don't think I'm going to make it. And
Yeah.
nothing ever happened like that again. I mean, there's always some crazy stuff that would
Yeah,
happen, you know,
but
but
throwing
nothing like
stars,
that.
dude.
What's
I
that?
had that. You're the first with the throwing star that I've heard
Oh,
of, right? I mean, I,
it freaked me out. And I remember playing Donington with Dave, where they're throwing bottles of urine on stage, you know, because there was
oh
like a hundred
God,
thousand people there, and I remember that. So I remember little things like that, but kind of the whole thing is kind of a vague memory of not really remembering the day by day. But you remember a
yeah,
Chinese star and urine.
yeah,
You can
yeah.
always remember that.
Urine, man. You know what? I'm counting blessings that neither of those two have happened to me,
Yeah,
which is, I mean, there's been some stuff, but
yeah,
you talked about going up there 2 years prior to check them out in Fresno. You said
yeah.
the backstage was crazy. Because I think about how much documentation there was backstage with Van Halen, and I knew Roth was a party guy then. But yeah, what was that experience like, man? Back, the just I'm sure girls, right, are everywhere, and there's probably a plethora of substances that were being thrown around.
Yeah.
But uh, but you've been around the scene a long time, so it wasn't like you were green. You know what?
Right. I mean, I went on the road with Maynard Ferguson's band, the jazz trumpet player guy, in 1981, and I was like 19 years old. And even though that sounds like a jazzy kind of a old thing, it was pretty rock and roll for a big band. I mean, we had 20
Yeah,
guys on a Greyhound bus going around, and there's probably more partying on that bus than there was with Dave.
I'm
But
sure.
but that was a real moment in my life that I kind of grew up really fast. And like when people ask me, what do you want to do? I don't really, in my life now, I still don't know exactly what I want to do from here on forward, musically or anything like that. But I do know what I don't want to do.
Yeah,
That wisdom has hit me where I don't want to do certain things anymore. And I remember halfway out on the tour, the girl thing and the drinking thing. I used to drink like crazy. I don't drink anymore. I used to go out tons of girls and do that whole thing, and I changed my life for that stuff. But it was eye opening, and to this day, it's hard for me to kind of celebrate some of that stuff because when you're older and you look back at it, you're more embarrassed than you are than especially when you have kids.
yeah,
And
yep.
thankfully, I never had a daughter where I just want to kill anybody who showed up at my front yard.
I
But
get it.
it was eye opening for me because I got sucked into it big time in the beginning and just followed the canoe and did the whole thing. And then about halfway through, I kind of started looking around, going, "All right, I got to figure this out because I know." If I know myself, if I continue down this road, I'm not going to be here. So,
At
uh,
19,
well, I mean,
made
this is with Dave. I kind of
Yeah,
with
yeah, but
Dave.
I'm thinking,
Yeah,
but if that was your first introduction at 19, right? You
yeah.
came from Detroit, and your first experience was surrounded by a bunch of guys that were part of that. It would be hard not to get sucked in,
It
But
was weird, man. I remember being on the road with Maynard. We were on the bus and we're driving a million miles to some gig, and everybody was drinking beer and just kind of getting wasted on the bus. And Maynard came back and he goes, "You guys think you guys are rock and rollers?" He goes, "In the '50s and '60s, we used to go on these buses with the old jazz cats, and
yeah,
they would stand up and they would all do heroin on the bus, connected to the luggage racks, and they would just shoot up and then just stand for like six
ooh,
hours to the next city. I mean, that was like hardcore stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that was a whole other world in that era. So uh, it's all the same, right? I mean, there's that saying in the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun. It's all the same stuff, just kind of shifted around here and there. So, I
Yeah,
mean, the Dave thing was an amazing experience. I grew about 30 years in that thing.
I'll bet.
And at the end, after we did Little Ain't Enough, and Dave let me go because he wanted to go in a different direction and stuff. And it was it was kind of a blessing for both of us. I kind of
Yeah.
I just shifted into what I usually do, and yeah, it was good.
What is that?
What's that?
You said I decided to go in the direction of what I usually do. What is that?
Well,
Did,
I was writing songs. I used to be a staff writer for Island
oh,
Records,
yeah,
and
Island
I
Def
just
Jam.
really love writing, and I love recording bands and doing that stuff. And when you're out on the road, you kind of we all had Brett Tuggle, the keyboard player, and Steve Vai, and we all had these monster studio rigs made for the road. And our poor roadies and security guys had to bring them in to every gig. I mean, these things were anvil cases with keyboards that came out, speakers, microphones, and they were like 1,000 pounds, and these poor guys used to carry them in for us and bring them to the gig, and we'd all write before the gig, and we would write for the records for Dave or for other
Really?
things. I
Okay.
mean, an insane amount of work for these guys, you know. And
Hold on a second. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah,
at that point, you're talking 2-inch tape, right? Or like 1-inch tape, because there's no digital tracking then.
what did we do? How did we do? I had the D88s, I think, and I
Okay,
think Tuggle had like, whatever the
gotcha.
thing was. Yeah, it was all
Okay,
for that stuff. So it was full
okay,
blown,
yeah,
huge. That's a good question. I haven't even thought about that. What we recorded on. I think I had a board. That's how big the thing was. It rolled out
sure,
a board like a eight. I had. Oh no, you know what I had? I had the Akai 414. I think.
okay,
Uh, that thing that 8 channels, and I used to
yeah,
link two of them together. I mean, they were monster studios, so the direction I wanted to do was just write anything. For Island, they'd pay me like 25 grand a year to just write pop songs, or at the time it was like heavy rock songs. They're trying to
yeah.
get them placed with the bands and stuff. So, so when I got done with Dave, I kind of got more focused into just doing what I knew I was really good at. You know.
I love this story. Okay, so transitioning into that, the idea of writing for pop songs and pop artists, right? So I know Frontiers, that label, has been real big in sort of the
Yeah.
hard rock genre, and a lot of bands that were sort of legacy acts, right, from that era went to Frontiers. And from what I understand, the owner of that label has sort of been contributing writer. They've had writers to write for a lot of the legacy artists. And then you think about the big artists. You've got the Taylor Swifts of the world and Drakes and the Big Pop and commercial artists, um, where they've got a whole suite of writers, right? They'll come in
Yeah.
and the name sits up front. Taylor's a bad example because I know she wrote a vast majority of her stuff for the longest time, but you've got pop artists that get known for these big, massive hit singles, but they didn't have any part of the writing, right? They've got
Right.
the Matt Bissonettes in the background with the label that are saying,
Right.
all right, you're writing verse, chorus, music, everything. You're supplying those as beds, and you're just saying, put your voice on it.
Yeah, I mean, I did the island thing for about 3 years maybe, and
Okay.
I wasn't really great at writing with people, being a good people person back then, because I thought that I knew everything about writing, that I could do
Okay.
the perfect song on my own, where they were trying to get people politically to write with these bands so they'd want to do their song on the record, because usually Aerosmith would want to do the song that they wrote. They
Right.
necessarily didn't want somebody else like a Diane Warren coming in,
Sure.
but they knew that they needed help at that time, or whatever the situation was, so it worked out. But I would kind of get together with these bands and stuff, and I kind of realized another thing that I wasn't really good at was kind of writing with other people, which I'm a lot better at now because I've had
Sure.
the humility bone hit there. But I just remember I was writing with this band. You remember Femme Fatale, that
Oh yeah, of
band?
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we met like 3 or 4 times at my house and wrote a couple songs. And
Was
at
that with
that time,
Lorraine?
sorry,
Lorraine Lewis, right?
yeah, really
Yeah.
sweet, really nice, and and I was sure that I had all the answers in the world. So I had this song in my head, "Sun in the Shadows." This title kept hitting me in the head, "Sun in the Shadows," and I just wouldn't let it go. I was like, "No, we have to use that title," for some stupid reason, right? And she's
Right.
trying to be nice, and they're trying to be nice, and they're playing on my, little studio, and I just pushed myself right out of that gig because I thought I knew everything. And part of that thing for me, after I got let go by Island, which is another, they were like, you got to write more popular songs. I kind of realized that I just want to write what I want to write. I just want to, certain, like the bands that I'm in now that I write, that we have with my brother and different things. There's no rules, there's no regulations. And back then it was more, there was these rules,
It's corporate.
you got to
Yeah.
hit the chorus within a minute. You got to do this. You got to
Right.
do that. And I just wasn't good at that, So now I just kind of write whatever I want, and there's nobody telling me not to do it. So the corporate writing thing was another thing that I wasn't really super at, but it was really fun, and I got to write with really cool people, and I met a lot of people that I was in bands with later. And but yeah, I after Dave, it just kind of everything started kind of happening with the songwriting thing, and then getting in after that, a couple years later, starting playing with Satriani and meeting different people, and then everything always just led to something else, which it always does, right? For you too, right? It's the
Well,
same.
absolutely. I mean, this conversation has happened so many times with players, especially guys that have done session work and they've played in a myriad of bands that and you articulated this very well. You know, you mentioned taking Billy's spot with David Lee Roth's gig. I had that experience for sure. I did the missing persons gig for a bit, right? And so coming in
Oh,
after
yeah,
Terry
no
Bozzio,
problem.
yeah. And I'm like, I would tell Dale, like, you know, she'd say, "All right, so we're gonna do the solo on this song," and I said, "Listen, I'm not your ex-husband, right? I'm
Right.
not Terry. Me trying to be Terry will get me crucified and probably get you booed off the stage, right?" So, and she was cool about me bringing my own interpretation to it, but I went, you know, I did a handful of those gigs over time, and but I've seen her with other drummers on the gig, and I watch from the side, and great players that are playing behind her, but I watch the guys in the crowd that are like arms crossed up front of the stage and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
roasting them. You know,
yeah,
they're just pissed and they're like throwing, you know, throwing stars at the
yeah.
guys because there is no other Terry, right? And there is no other Billy. It just like, you know, I had Rudy Sarzo on the show, right? And
Hmm.
him coming in after Randy Rhoads died and Brad Gillis having to cover that spot.
Yeah,
You can't step into Randy Rhoads' shoes and not expect
right.
people to just, you know, the dude is not there anymore. There's nothing they can do, right? They got to get replaced with somebody. But, um,
So
but you
when you played with Missing Persons, did you have the crazy drum set with all the Terry
no,
stuff? So it
no.
was complete. You just did your thing.
Yeah, I mean, I added more toms than I normally would with a Flock of Seagulls gig, you know, but,
Yeah,
yeah, I could have gone all rototoms, you know,
yeah.
or, yeah, but
Right.
or Simmons drums, but no, you know, I added whatever I needed to get the signature parts together.
Yeah.
You gotta have a couple of China boys, that's the main thing, right?
Yeah.
You have
Exactly.
but, but, that experience, it is humbling, right? Because no matter what, even if you do a really good job, there's always going to be somebody that just rakes you over the coals and being able to be confident enough in your own abilities. And at the end of the day, those people don't know you at all, right? So
Right.
like they don't know that Matt Bissonette is actually just a really cool hang, right? And
Yeah, I am. Right.
the hang is the thing. I mean, that's the thing that I talk about on the
Yeah.
show is that
Yeah.
you could have a basic fundamental group of chops, and as long as you can cover the parts, the hang is way more important to secure the gig, right?
Yeah, especially for the road, right? I mean, you're
Yeah,
90, it's probably 80% hang, 20% playing. It's
yeah,
so funny that you said that because I was just talking about we were at breakfast the other day, hanging out with some friends of mine, and we heard Missing Persons in the radio, and I was like, how I don't even know how they covered that gig once he left,
yeah.
because he was so integral in that thing. But you just come in and do you, right? You just come in and you play
Had
it the
to,
way you hear it. And most of the time when you hear the negativity, and I put myself in this position, like usually the people that are most vocal about hating you don't know a thing about music anyway.
right.
So
Yep.
no matter what you did, they wouldn't get it. They just have their minds made up. It's not that guy. It's like when I would go see Kansas, my favorite band in the world.
Is it? Okay.
I would go hear them, and Steve Walsh would sometimes change the melodies, and my
Oh,
friends would get so ticked off. That's different than the record. And I'm going,
yeah,
if I could sing like Steve Walsh, I'd sing different every night, which he
yeah,
did, and it was amazing. But some people are just haters on that stuff, and you just go, I remember we played with Satriani at Universal Amphitheater in LA, and it was kind of like a hometown thing. Had a bunch of friends come down, and the big thing when I would play with Joe, with the rabid Stu fans, when they'd introduce me, they'd all go, Stu, Stu, this big Stu thing that they
ooh,
would do when he was playing. And I would just listen to it, and at first I was kind of bugged by it, but then I was just laughing because I miss Stu too. I
yeah,
would love to see Stu do his peanut solo thing and all that stuff
right,
as a fan, but for whatever reason, those guys parted ways, and the world goes on. And Stu went on his way, and Joe kept going his way, and guys like you and I get stuck in the crossfire. It's like
right. Oh,
it
a
is, and it
million.
was, and if it wasn't us, it'd be somebody else.
Yeah, that
So You know,
Where, at the end of the day, if you don't let that get to you and you do work your way into the next opportunities and you can feel really good about feeling like, all right, yeah, man, I did my best and my
yeah,
best was good enough. And so, for the artist, because at the end of the day, the only
yeah,
person that's really important to please is the guy that's hiring you, right? So I
exactly.
when Taylor Hawkins passed away 2 years ago and Josh Freese ended up on the gig,
Yeah,
I watched all the people roast Josh Freese. And
right,
you and I both know, man, Josh Freese is as appropriate for that gig and any other gig as you can find, right? And I remember seeing people say, "Oh yeah, man, his meter's too good, or he doesn't play the way that Taylor did." And I'm thinking, you know what, man? There's only one guy that you really have to impress, and that's Dave Grohl, right? If Dave is
right.
happy with your playing, then the people will eventually follow. You mentioned Satriani a second ago, and your old boss, right? Your old employer or your old bandmate.
Yeah,
I did go see him do the Sammy Hagar gig about, I don't know, 7-8 months ago, maybe not even that
yeah.
long
Me too.
ago.
Me too. Yeah,
Amazing show, right?
right.
Uh, you know, uh, Jason was still doing the gig when I saw it. It was just before he left, um, and so Joe playing Eddie's parts. They had just done the Howard Stern show, right? And so Howard was asking him about, all the Van Halen stories, and Joe, man, it threw caution to the wind. They were talking about doing Mean Street. He said, "Yeah, I think it's like this." They hadn't worked it out yet. He just comped the parts as best he could, but
Right,
on the Howard Stern show, they hadn't rehearsed it, and it was really close, but it wasn't exactly because he hadn't practiced it, right?
right.
And people went nuts, man, and they're like, "How dare Joe Satriani try to play Eddie Van Halen parts?"
Yeah.
We both know Joe, he can handle those parts just fine,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah,
you couldn't even please those fans as Joe Satriani. And,
yeah, yeah.
like, at the end of the day, Sammy was happy. Eddie would have been pleased, I think, with what Joe put together on that show.
Absolutely, man. It was definitely honoring to him, and I saw him too when we were on the road. We went and saw them on a night off in New York, and it was loud, man. It was
Yeah.
wicked loud and really great. It was amazing. But I mean, you're not going to make everybody happy, and I realized that a long time ago. But now it's 20 times worse because of the internet and because of
All right.
everybody's entitled, because their opinion is so important that the world needs to hear their opinion about Joe's guitar playing on that. Like,
Right.
and the person saying it probably never even touched the guitar or knows
Right.
anything about it.
Well, they
So
probably
that's
play Guitar Hero video game and they think they're
yeah,
guitarists.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
it
But
is.
they're
Yeah.
really good on that. But
Yeah.
it's just a kind of a sad place for that stuff, because you would never say half this stuff to someone's face.
Right.
I mean, that
Yeah.
respect level has just gone out the window, and it's sad. And I also learned in the old days too that when I would look at online to see what people thought of what I was doing or play on the road or my album that I put out or whatever, and it was mostly positive, cool stuff, and I would feel kind of cool about it. Then I'd see the one person that just ripped me a new one, and I just focused on that one guy.
The
What could I
one
have
guy.
done? What could I have done to make that? What could I have done to do that? And you just go, it's just so bogus to even entertain that thought of pleasing everybody, because it never happens. And I sometimes dig into this stuff and now I don't even look at anything, because I just told my wife the other day, don't send me any more Instagram stuff. I'm off.
Yeah.
I can't stand listening to, it's like it's what happened with the news ever since Walter Cronkite in the old days, where they would just the news, right? Read the
Right.
news. And then the newscasters inserted the word I think. I
Mm,
th- so this is what the speech is. Now, I think this is what he said. We just went backwards 100 years, because I
right.
heard that speech. I know what he said. I don't need you to tell me what it is. I don't
Right.
need some guy online telling me I need to twirl my guitar or play what. It's just that I do know is not helping us.
Yeah. No, armchair
Yeah.
quarterbacks, keyboard warriors. Yeah. That,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, if you can't hear Josh Freese play with that band and think that it's amazing, just because your love for Taylor, and I'm sure Taylor would be going, Josh, you're
dude.
killing it, man.
Yeah,
Because
he
I mean,
would. You're right.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, I think Josh is probably real comfortable being able to, go to the store and feel like he did his best, and Dave Grohl is happy with him, and you, coming into the Roth gig with your brother and Steve Vai, and you're not Billy, you're Matt Bissonette, man, and you're out
Exactly.
killing it, and
Well,
and and
you're going to the NAMM show, right?
I'm gonna be there tomorrow night. Yeah.
So the NAMM show is about 10 minutes from my house, where I'm at now.
Okay.
And my first gig that I got when I moved to California in 1983, uh, I got a gig playing 5 days a week at Disneyland, and the band that comes up from the ground, right? Tomorrowland
Yeah.
Terrace. And I met one of my best friends there, a bunch of cool bands, and I met my wife. My wife was the singer in that band, right?
No
It
kidding.
completely changed my best gig I ever had in my life. But the weirdest thing was Josh Freese was playing there 5 days a week on another stage with his band, and he was like
That's
12 years old, right?
yeah,
And he would come
ridiculous.
back and he'd go, "Hey man, I'm working on this independent stuff with my left and right hand. I'm gonna get together with Vinny, and I'm gonna meet your brother next week." He was already 10 steps ahead, man. I
Right.
mean, back then. This was like
Yeah.
1984. And their band was amazing, and they were playing cover tunes, but that's where Josh got his chops, and he was
Disney.
playing. Yeah.
That
Oh yeah.
well, I mean, I think I first saw him doing the Devo gig. We did shows together 20, I guess it was 2002, 2003, and, yeah, he was smoking, but I had already seen his stuff with, maybe with, like, he did the Vandals, of course, he did Perfect Circle, he
Yeah.
was covering for Vinny, playing with Sting. I mean, not, like, Sting's not taking, like, hacks, and
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think, props to him. There are a lot of pro musician friends of mine too that used to say that they wouldn't have minded if Josh threw them a bone because he was seemingly getting every gig in town if it
Yeah.
wasn't taken by your brother or,
Right.
you know,
Abe
or,
Laboriel.
or,
Yeah.
or Aronoff or Abe.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But, at the end of the day, I mean, you love to see guys win. For me, I like seeing guys that have earned it and are worthy. But, um, so let's
Yeah.
let's
I
let's wrap.
agree.
I mean, like, so moving on from Roth, and you had a good pedigree. I mean, the Sheena Easton thing is cool because I knew that must have been about time that Prince had been producing her too, right?
Yeah, she just came out with Sugar Walls and all that stuff right at that time, and yeah, she was at the top of her game then, and it was pretty wild. It was
Yeah,
pretty cool. I mean, it was rock and roll too, a different, it's R&B, which I love playing R&B stuff and different things like that. And around that time, I was also kind of working with Jeff Lorber a little bit, like
oh,
for
wow.
funk stuff, and I
Yeah,
was just kind of trying to find out, because Greg and I, and you, I'm sure yourself could say this, you've got immersed into all styles because we grew up with our AM radios, where you'd go, okay, down at this dial, they're playing weather report, and then it's
yeah.
going to Chicago and Kansas and Russia. All it just went like this, completely different, which is not like that anymore. But we soaked that stuff in so much that we just wanted to be good at all the different styles to be able to just plug in and do that. So R&B has always been fun, and jazz and different things like that. And lately, like orchestra music and playing the big bass and doing all that stuff. And like the other night, I went and saw the Bob Dylan movie. Did you see that yet?
Oh man, you know what? We mentioned it yesterday too in the show. My girlfriend just watched it. She loved it. I still haven't seen it yet. So
Yeah, I came out of that going, I did not know anything about that guy.
yeah,
And I just bought a new acoustic guitar, and I put the capo on it and played a chord, and I go, that's what he does. He does that capo thing. It's like, I took me 63 years old to figure out a guitar capo thing. So the last 3 days I've just spent each day going, I'm gonna write a song that sounds like Bob Dylan. And I've been writing these, so there it is. Come on, baby.
there's the capo. But,
Let's play a tune.
oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm
So
coming
I
down the
mean,
studio. Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of like things inspire you, and you just get into it, and yeah, the Sheena gig was great, kind of a launching pad from that. And Greg and I were also, uh, we were going to do the Gino Vanelli tour, and we rehearsed and everything, and then my band A440 got signed, and I think I was talking to you about this earlier when we were
Yeah.
talking, just getting our levels together and stuff. Uh, we had a band called A440, and we had a really good singer. It was kind of like Duran Duran on steroids. We all were like, beautiful looking dudes, and we were playing, and a really great band. Nick Brown was the songwriter and the guitar player. And we did a video for MTV, and we were signed by Russ Reagan on Polygram Records. And then the record came out, but it came out the same day, same label as Bon Jovi "Slippery Than Wet," the same day. First, you give Love a Bad Name comes out, and then a half an hour later, our video comes out, and it was just like we're just going,
game over.
yeah,
Right.
game over. But it was the Spinal Tap moment. It was the Black album, or I mean, it was just kind of like things happen like that, and it was a great band and great players. It's just the wrong time,
Were you guys on Q Prime in management at that point?
No, the Nick's wife, Bobby Brown, was a manager, but yeah, it was.
I mean, a lot of the Polygram bands had Cliff and Q Prime as their management, and they were all sort of like under that same like sort of shadow of Bon Jovi.
Is that how you got hooked up with Animotion? Because that was a Polygram band too, wasn't it?
They were a Polygram band. Nope. No, I was playing in an original band here in Portland, and Bill, the singer from Animotion, moved up here. He'd seen me in another project. They were going to put the band together for one reunion gig. And if you knew that history of that band, it's funny because they unfortunately let the girl singer of the band go, and they brought in Cynthia Rhodes, Richard Marx's wife. And you were talking about writing, ghost writing for other artists. And Richard was doing all that, right? He was writing for everybody at that point. But Cynthia came in, they did a single together. Bill ended up leaving at that point. They got a different guy. So two totally new singers, and they went out and released Room to Move. The band took off again, kind of another trajectory, but that was the end. The band really was no longer a band. So they dissolved. Bill put the band back together, wanted a one reunion gig. Don Kirkpatrick had been playing guitar with Rod Stewart, right? Don,
he's a good guy. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Great dude. Don had been doing that gig. Gregg, the keyboardist, had been doing Jose Feliciano. He was on the Thriller record. He had all this other stuff. So they were just going to do one gig. And Don said, drummer here, kind of a heavy metal guy, man. This is fun. He said, we get to hit a lot harder than we used to. We should do more of these. And it ended up being 16 years of that reunion of Animotion. I did that gig for a long time. It was fun.
Well, how long did you do that for?
So 16. I did that.
And were you guys playing with... were you using the sequencers and all that stuff? Were you doing all that stuff?
Man, I mean, if you really want to geek out, we had, Bill's going to hate me for this. He's like my brother, so he knows. We had a myriad of different attempts at backing tracks for some stuff. We had some sequencers because like the keyboardist couldn't always be there, so we had that synth bass line. We did mini DAT tapes that would melt in the open sunlight. And we had iPod one time. We did a gig with Frampton. And you remember the iPods with the big dial on them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's what ran the backing tracks and the click, the stereo track. But Bill would give me the iPod, and I had to start the track. We did this gig with Frampton once in Temecula. I remember it was like everything that could go wrong in this gig did. I hit start to start the click in my ear. But it was dialed to his warm-up tapes for his vocals. So it would go and over the whole PA. And then I had to quickly stop, dial it back to the track. And I'm thinking, all right, so I look like the bad guy. I'll own it, whatever. I'll raise my hand. Yeah. But everything that could go wrong in that band for the sequencers and backing tracks did. And they, laptop would have been a better choice, but we just tried it all, man, and it was fun.
What year did you start playing with that band?
2002.
Okay, because I was thinking in the 80s, they probably used those QX7s and all those crazy sequencers and stuff. I just remember being in. Do you remember E.G. Daly, the girl who does? She did the Pee Wee Herman movie, and does the voices for all the cartoon movies. She had a rock band, and Matt Sorum was playing drums in it. And
really?
Michael Damian was the keyboard player, and they would almost get in fistfights every day, fighting over the sequencer. I think it was a QX7 or something like that.
Yeah,
and it would always stop working, and it was all like ticka kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh man, and it was like the first generation of learning all that sequencer stuff, and I remember Matt just getting so mad.
Yeah. Didn't have to worry about that too much when he got the Cult gig. Just straight up like meat.
That's right. He went to that right after that. So
that's right. And then Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. A little band called Guns N' Roses.
Little band. That's speaking of little bands, little artists, there's probably no bigger name on the planet than your current employer, right? So you've been doing the Elton John gig for a while.
Yes,
And
since
tell me,
2012. Yeah.
all right, so 13 years. Um, I'm thinking about that time Elton and Billy were doing some tours together, right? Billy Joel. They had
Yeah.
like dual tours together. And I
Yeah.
remember, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember um, that Killer Show Hired Gun. Remember that documentary came out a few years ago?
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So they had Liberty DeVito on the show talking about his, the end of times with Billy, but how Billy just got raked at the coals by his manager, just like taken for like $100 million or something
Mm.
crazy like that. And I remember reading that Elton loved Billy. They were great friends. And he said, "Hey man, let's get you out of that hole. Let's get out and tour together. We're going to do a dual headlining tour and get out there and do these shows," which was genius and heroic, I felt like. And I mean, really, what bigger show could you have two artists, So you were on those gigs, right? You were doing some
No,
of those
that
shows.
was right after. That was right before I started.
Okay.
And that sounds like something Elton would do because he likes those big save the world projects of helping
Yeah.
people out. Not that Billy Joel would ever need help, but
He didn't ask for it. He just offered. It sounded like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it sounds like something he would do. Yeah, well, I got the gig in 2012. My friend Bob Birch. Did you ever know Bob Birch, bass
I didn't
player?
know Bob.
He one day I grew up in Detroit, and one day I went to my jazz band rehearsal in high school. Started at 7 a.m. This guy with a beard shows up, and the band director goes, "This is Bob Birch. He's going to be the student teacher for the year." And and it was Bob Birch. He's a bass player, and within 2 days we were best pals. I was 15, 16 years old, so he gave me his fake ID to go see his band play in clubs in Detroit. So I would show up at these bars with this ID with a big beard on it, and they go, "Yeah, sure, come on in." So I'd go see their band and play and kind of learn top 40 stuff like that. Anyway, Bob went on to play with Elton, like in the late '90s or I think mid '90s. So Bob had been in the band, I think, for like 30 years, and then he passed away. He actually took his
Mm.
life uh, at his house in Northridge, and I remember that Davey called me. Davey Johnson, the guitar player, called me because he knew me from a Beatle band I was in with my brother and Brett Tuggle. And Rocket Rashad was a guitar player, and he goes, "It's a terrible situation, but we have a gig in like a week and a half. Can you
Wow.
do it?" And it was another one of those moments like, God has blessed me with stuff. He just kind of goes, "Here you go.
Beautiful.
You just have to go hang out in a club and get people to remember your face and do a million auditions." It was just another one of those "here you go" things. And I remember going to Bob's house the day after he died and playing catch with his son. And
Oh,
and Jonathan was just looking at me like, "Why would my dad do this?" We're throwing a football, and I just said, "Hey," I asked his wife Michelle. I go, "Hey, they offered me this gig. How weird is this?" I mean,
mm,
I've known Bob since 1977, and she goes, "You know what? If anybody would do this gig, he'd want you to do this gig. Because it's. So I got that gig, and I remember praying about it, going, I just want to honor my buddy for this
yeah.
gig. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a great gig and everything, but I still had to kind of think about it when Davey called me. I was like, Davey goes, "Okay, so we're going to travel a lot, and
Yeah.
you're either going to love me or hate me in about 6 months, but you're going to see places you've never seen before, and we're off and running. Do you want to do it?" So I signed up for it, and I had like 5 days to learn like 100 songs. I mean, it was like a
Oh my, yeah.
long,
The catalog's
long, yeah,
ridiculous.
crazy amount of songs, and they're not easy songs because the way they write. With Bernie comes in with lyrics, and then he'll put the lyrics up and he'll write the songs to the lyrics. So there's always odd phrases and bars and things that you would never normally do when you write songs. That was the hardest part, is figuring out how he does it. So I remember I was with Rick Springfield at the time. We were on the road, and I remember being in Vancouver, and I just remember walking around because I hired two friends of mine to write the charts from Bob's last gig, and he just killed. He was sitting down because his back was pretty messed up, and he was just in so much pain. He had to sit, and so I I learned all his bass parts. They were on charts, and then I'm kind of listening to him, and I'm going, you know what? Elton's not going to want me to be reading charts. I'm going to have to memorize this stuff. So
Yeah.
I walked around Stanley Park in Vancouver for like a whole day, just
Oh,
playing the songs over and over and trying to. The hardest part was those odd bars of time, like the Beatles would do. They would just throw in a 3/4 bar
right.
that you just go, that's weird, but you're trying to think of it as a musician. And what Nigel Olsson, he got to be a really good friend of mine. He would never, when we would record with Elton, he would never write a chart or look at it. He would just listen to the song. He would just be sitting there with his headphones listening to Elton playing and just getting the song in his head, and not so much, well, this is the B section, and that's the British thing, man. That's what they do. And the first time I
Yeah.
was in the studio with Elton, I remember, I tell the story all the time, so forgive me if you heard it before, but um, we're at Village Studio in LA and we're recording a song. So Bernie comes in, he puts the lyrics out there. Elton's throwing things, he's going out like this, and he focuses on a song. So he sits on the piano and he's writing to it. And Davey told me what Bob used to do is he would be right there writing a chart for him and for the guys in the band just to know what's going on. And he's writing and he's writing and he goes, okay, let's do it. So we start recording. Instead of the typical, like, let's get a click track, let's form this thing out on Pro Tools, he just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, starts playing, right? The red light's on, we're recording. And everybody's clamming, making mistakes, but Elton plows through the thing, plays the song, and then we get done, and then they go, let's take a listen. And I go, well, why are we going to listen? Obviously, there was a bunch of mistakes, so why don't we just do another one? And then we'll click it up and no click track at all, just him counting. So we go in there and listen to it, and I'm hearing the mistakes and stuff, and I'm hearing myself clam all. And instead of going, okay, let's click it up, he goes, all right, I want to double my vocal now. And he goes out there and sings to his, and then I'm looking around and everyone's, just business as usual. I'm going, what's going on here, man? This is kind of weird. So he doubles his part, he sings it good, he does his thing, and then Davey goes, let me put on another guitar part. So he goes in there, he's playing acoustic, and then he puts on electric part. And I'm watching this song kind of morphing around, and I keep going, I want to fix my bass part. But the
Yeah.
more I'm listening to it, the more I'm going, every clam has now become uh, really, really cool and charming. It's like that's the sound of the 60s and the 70s. And
Right.
that's exactly what they did. They would just start a song and throughout the day add things and mix it and they're done. They don't start the mix over again and let's check the kick drum out. It
Right.
was the mix in progress. The song was in progress. It was like a freight train and you just got to get on it. And that taught me a lot that day. And that's how they do it. I mean,
I mean, thinking about that, because I hadn't heard that story, so much music is sterile these days because it has been so
yeah,
sanitized that way, right? And yeah,
yeah.
and quantized and just like homogenized, and that's amazing to
Yeah,
think
you just
that.
look at a wave file of a song from the 60s and it's going
Yeah,
like this and stuff and now
right,
we're like
right. That's
compressed
true.
and smashed. It's kind of crazy. I don't know what happened to us, but I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I love playing with a click and I know my brother loves it too because it removes all doubt of dragging and rushing and all that stuff.
Yeah,
And like my brother, I don't know about you for playing drums, but if you got like a click to like a slower song, he'll always first
yeah.
thing Greg will say is double that click up, ching,
Mm,
ching, check, just because we're kind of used to that. But
that subdivision. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and it just feels better because it's like an instrument playing. But
yeah,
the no click thing, it's still to this day because with Elton, we'd never play with tracks. It was always just Nigel would get a tempo, Chris, the drum tech, would
yeah,
click the starting tempo off, and then it was off to the races. And I realized on the first gig, the bass player's role with Elton's band is not so much playing or doing whatever. It's keeping Elton and Nigel both happy because they have two completely different concepts of the way this gig is going to go.
really.
Elton wants to play everything faster. He can get out of there and get on his plane. and
Oh,
Nigel is dug in on the record tempos, which are completely two different things, right?
sure.
And my job is, and Bob used to tell me about it. He goes, "That's the craziest part, man. Every night I walk off stage, just going, is that you play to Elton, but you also play to Nigel, because you don't want to bum Nigel out. And
Right.
if you're just going with him and schmoozing Elton and
Sure.
playing with him and rushing, and then Nigel's back there, I'm going to last a week, you know. So I figured it out first day. This has to happen. It's like you ever see the Jerry Seinfeld thing when him and Elaine are in the room and they go, "How do we have this and introduce that?" I don't know if you ever seen
Right.
that. It's like you have to play nice with everybody. And like you said earlier, it's 80% the hang and
Yeah.
20% music once you get going. Once you show everybody that you can do it,
Yeah.
you have to do it every day and be cool on the bus, you know?
You mentioned that you and Nigel have grown to be really close,
Yeah.
and that, I would imagine, I mean, it makes sense, right? For non-musicians that might be watching this, you might not realize how important the relationship is for that rhythm section, for the members of the rhythm section to be able to not only play sort of metronomically together, but there's a chemistry that man, you can't manufacture the stuff. You grew up playing with your brother, right? I mean, your
Mhm.
brother is like one of the most highly regarded drummers on the planet, obviously regarded highly from one of the biggest names in the drumming industry, and as Ringo Starr's drummer. Uh, but you guys grew up in Motown too, which is such a massive music city.
Yeah.
I'm sure romantics were happening when you were there. Those guys,
Yeah.
like I play with Mike Skill now and then as well. The guitarist in the band lives here in Portland with me, and we do a lot of
Wow.
gigs together. He talks a lot about those formative years for him in Detroit,
Yeah.
how like R&B and that Motown sound really rooted, in blues and jazz. And then there's a flair of punk rock that's totally Detroit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everything was edgy from Detroit. People worked hard. It's a blue collar town. They learned that you kind of had to fight for everything you wanted, and even in the music biz, right? Nothing was handed to bands in Detroit. Nothing was handed to anybody in Detroit, really, unless you're an exec at GM. But
Yeah.
um, do you feel like that kind of mindset pushed you guys in the music biz to kind of be working harder than other people
Oh
that grew up
yeah.
in other places? Yeah.
Absolutely. And um, I don't know if you follow the football season at all, but the
Oh
Detroit
yeah.
Lions, the whole grit thing and
Oh
that whole thing, that team now encapsulates most of the people that have grown up in Detroit. I mean, it is
yeah.
kind of a word picture on the everything, but uh, yeah, I mean, it's different when you grow up. I mean, we're living in California and living up there where you are. Our harshest winters are nothing compared to
Right.
back east and north, and you
Yeah.
grow up in that stuff, and you can't help but just you're tough, and
Yeah.
people are tougher, and they're brutally honest. They don't take any junk from anybody. They just tell it like it is, and there's none of the California "I love you, man," and not really. It's kind of it is
Right.
what it is, and it's my dad. Was a drummer, and he worked at nighttime playing gigs, and he delivered tasty bread 6 7 days a week in the
Mm.
snow at 4:30 in the morning, and we all had parents that worked their butts off
Yeah.
to supply for us, and you see that, and that never goes away. I mean, we Greg and I were so thankful that our parents got us into the music business, because it's kind of away from the real work. I mean, we're working,
Right.
but we're playing in a sandbox, basically, all of us
Yeah.
that are doing this. But the work ethic of just like saying earlier, we just want to make the boss happy, whatever it takes. I'll stand on my head, I'll play my bass upside down, I'll do whatever.
Yeah.
You call me again, and what Greg does, which most people probably don't know, Greg's a pretty hyper, very social guy, and he is probably the funniest guy I've ever met in my life. And we show up at a session and he's playing there and he's already there. I know he's already worked the room, and not so much working the room, but he's just being who he is.
Yeah.
He is that person that you see on these videos where he's like, "Hey man," he's
Yeah.
just, I wish I could be more like that. I'm the brother that's a little bit calmer because I've watched him, and
Yeah.
I can kind of fly on his wings, for
There's only
gigs
so
and
much
for
air in the room. Matt.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And I
Yeah.
learned that because that's the way it was with my mom and dad. My dad was
Okay.
just like my brother, and my mom would just kind of she'd roll her, oh, bud, and so once Greg's train gets going, you just jump on and go with it, you know.
Yeah.
So we both grew up. I mean, I had a bass. My mom and dad, they said, "Hey, go out," because I started like playing a tennis racket in the basement, listening because I didn't want to do music because Greg's playing drums at dinner table, and my dad and him are talking drums, and I hated music. I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to play sports. So, but then I started listening to Rush and different bands in the basement and on my headphones with a guitar, tennis racket. And I was going, that's pretty cool. So my mom and dad were smart enough to pick that up, and I'm sure Greg probably said, you know, get get Matt a bass so we can hang out. And one day they go
Yeah.
get the groceries out of the car, and I open up the trunk and there's a bass and an amp. So Greg and I went in the basement and played Smoke on the Water for like 6 hours, or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
And within probably 4 months, my dad said, "Hey, do you want to make $50 a night?" And I go, $50 a night's like $300 a night now or something. I go,
Yeah,
"Yeah." He goes, "I'm going to buy you a tux, and we're going to do casuals weekend gigs together, playing weddings and stuff."
buddy.
So he showed me, took me to it, showed up and, take his Cadillac to the gig. I'd
Yeah.
load up the drums and everything and set it up. And there's an accordion player named Harry Demersion. And I go, "Dad, I have no idea. What am I supposed to do? I've been playing for like a month." He goes,
Yeah.
"Just listen to what I'm doing. Listen to the guy you're playing with, and just feel it. Just kind of make noise. It's a wedding. Nobody's gonna know anyway. Just have fun and play." And he goes, "But the most important thing is, if I point to you during the gig, go to the bar and get me a beer." That was it. That was the only thing that his only requirement. So we'd be playing, and I wasn't playing anything musical. I'm just kind of boom, boom. And the Harry's probably drunk off his butt just playing, going, I'm with my, bud, we're playing, stuff like that. But it just forced me to play. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. And ever since then, and he handed me $50. He bought me a tuxedo and $50 every night. 50. So by the time I was 14 years old, I got money saved in the bank. I'm going,
Yeah.
this is going to work. This is pretty cool. And that was the trajectory of him just going, here's my mom and dad, here's the road, do it or not. And by the time I was 16, I mean, the work ethic was like, tell me where to go. I'm playing the
Yeah.
gig. I'm taking my van. Let's go. And it just was like a machine by then. And to this day, it's kind of, I can hear my dad just going, show up early, just be nice to everybody.
Mm.
And that's what Greg does. I mean, by the time you get to the session, if you played like crap, it wouldn't matter because they love the guy.
Yeah. I
And
Man, you brought me back, actually. This is weird, man. You reminded me, like, my story was almost identical with my pop, too. My dad got me my first gig. It was a
yeah,
jazz standard wedding gig. It wasn't a wedding, it was at an art gallery, but I remember
well,
him saying, "Can you play jazz?" Because I was a rock guy, man. I was
yeah,
listening to rock, and I was practicing rock drums in my room, but he said, "I can get you this gig and 75 bucks," and I was 16, and I remember going and doing the gig, walking out of there with my 75 bucks, got flirted with by a bunch of, adult women and thinking, "This is what I wanna do the rest of my life. This is
yeah,
incredible." Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
but having the support from dad, right, and the encouragement because, we all know musicians that their parents were like, "Shut up." They don't wanna
yeah,
hear, the practice. But the fact that you and your brother both had it, and you both developed, this sort of synergy of working together and the yin yang of his personality type and yours, it's, it's remarkable. And I like you and I, we'd not gotten to meet in person before this little virtual meet. I've met your brother a handful of times. And like I said, I got to catch him with Ringo a couple years ago. My
mm,
son worshiped Beatles, right? From 10 years old, he knew more about the Beatles than I ever did. And
it's
he would
amazing, isn't
tell
it?
me stuff like we played the Cavern Club, with a flock of seagulls. They're from Liverpool, so we played the Cavern Club, and it was a big thing to go back to the Beatles' home, right? And I brought my son
Oh, I
over
was going to
for.
ask if you brought him. That's
I
so
did.
great.
Yeah, no, we did the whole Magical Mystery Tour, and he would tell me before we got to the spots, "Oh, yeah, Dad, this is where, George did this, and, if you go around the corner, this is all the stuff that's not read about in the movies," and,
How old was he then when you took him?
he was 16. He's
Wow.
23 now, and
Wow.
he the really cool thing about, like, this whole trajectory, uh, of course, he took me to see Ringo a couple years ago. I took him to see Paul up in Seattle, and watching the joy on this kid's face, right? I mean, think about most 16-year-olds, they're not interested in the
Yeah.
Beatles, right? But for him, he was an old soul.
Yeah.
Of course, he freaked out when I told him that I was having you on the show, because then he said, "Dad, if you don't already know, you need to get this." And he sends me the YouTube link, right? So we've got the Yellow Matted Custard gig that
Yeah.
this all-star crazy badass band dedicated to the Beatles. And it's you got Mike Portnoy on drums. You got Paul Gilbert, like one of the greatest guitarists of all time, on guitar, and then Neil Moore singing, right?
Yeah.
So how did that gig come about?
Those guys are the biggest Beatle freaks. I thought I was a Beatle freak,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
but
they're
Mike
dedicated.
and Neil Morse, yeah, man, these guys are way over the top. So I'm on the road with Satriani, and Dream Theater's playing with us, and I'm getting to be friends with Mike and the guys, and talking. And Mike is just talking about the Beatles all the time. He goes, "I'm thinking about doing some, would you want to come to New York and do the Modern Drummer Festival? We'll play some Beatles songs, and then Dream Theater will come out, and then we'll do a live gig at the I can't remember the place, the bar in New York on 42nd or whatever." And I go, "Yeah, yeah, let's do it, let's do it." And at the time, I was playing with Rick Springfield, Joe, and I was doing Boss Gags and the ELO thing. All these things were coming at the same time, and it was like this crazy, like music is.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's nothing going on. All of a sudden, you're saying no to things because you can't, and
Right.
that's just the way it is. So we're in the middle of all this stuff, and he goes, "Well, you want to do this gig?" I go, "Yeah." So he goes, "We'll play some Beatles songs, and he goes, they might be a little obscure songs, not the typical ones, but it'll be fun." So we fly to New York, and we have the Modern Drummer thing on a Friday afternoon or something, and then we're going to play the club on Saturday. So we get there the night before, and we do a rehearsal. But of course, in Mike Portnoy fashion, he doesn't just pick "I Want to Hold Your Hand" or
Right.
"Baby You Can
Twist and
Drive My
shout.
Car." He
Yeah.
goes deep, man. He
Yeah.
goes, he would do number nine, if it was up to him. Pick the most obscure songs, and so it was like work. Like, okay, we got to figure this out. But the crazy thing is that Paul shows up, and I'm realizing these guys are like Beatle level, and we all just looking at each other in the rehearsal, playing all these songs, just screaming, singing, and laughing because these songs are so amazing.
Yeah.
And we're playing, and I was already playing with Ringo, with Gregg on Ringo and the Roundheads, the band that I would play with them. So I got to meet, hang out with Ringo a lot, and so I was kind of in the Beatle thing there for a bit. So we were having so much fun at the rehearsal, and I'm trying to sing the Paul McCartney parts, which is way out of my range anyway. I don't know many guys that can kill that Paul stuff, but
Right.
it was so much fun that I sang so much that I lost my voice. So we get through the Modern Drummer show. We play like 5 songs, and then the Yellow Matter Custard Band would come back, and then Dream Theater would come out in the dark. It was just really, I think it's on one of the drum videos or whatever. But then the next night we play the gig for like 2 hours, and I'm so fried that I can't even talk. I
Oh,
remember going to a movie that like a half an hour, like a couple hours before the show, just sitting there going, "What am I going to do, man?" So we played that show. It's on YouTube, and I can't sing a note,
oh,
but it's there
no.
forever for all to see.
Yeah. I mean,
And
like, it's
yeah,
it's been watched. Yeah.
it's Mike. Mike was. I learned so much about Mike that night that guy can make oil out of a carpet. I mean, that guy can turn a profit with his ideas of marketing. Within a month, he already had a DVD, CD, live recording, T-shirts, hats. I probably made more money from that gig than I did with Elton. I mean, it was crazy the amount of money
Wow,
that
yeah.
guy can bring in. He's a machine.
I
Pretty
well,
amazing.
I'm excited for the first time getting to, I mean, I've not seen Dream Theater. Now that he's back in the band, I'm actually,
Yeah,
my both of my boys are gonna go see him next month, and, I'm excited about it. Like, I've known Mike Mangini, like, a
yeah,
bit, and it was a fun and fitting thing for him to come in during that absence from Portnoy, but
yeah,
Dream Theater with Mike Portnoy, that's
yeah.
his baby, man, and it'll be cool to see it. Mostly as a drummer, I'm just going to watch chops, right? I mean, those,
Right.
but the Beatles, the dedication to those Beatles songs, it wasn't like seeing a cover band. This is a
Yeah,
dedicated tribute because the stuff that on that Yellow Matted Custard live show, this stuff, like, was every attention was paid to not only the harmonies and the phrasing and the arrangements, but there, I was really blown away by this as a drummer when I went to go see the Ringo gig, and I've seen Gregg talk about this some too. There's a weird thing about Ringo. Drummers that say that Ringo was not that great a drummer are ridiculous. They're silly because they don't really listen to what made him so unique. If you listen to isolated tracks of just Ringo stuff,
Yeah.
because he was a left-handed guy playing a right-handed kit, it changed things. But there's a lilt to his playing, right? There's a weird lilt swing thing that he does. And I remember seeing Gregg doing it going, oh man, he's nailing it exactly the way Ringo would do it. That's the sound. You can't go in there and play like square 16th notes or 8th notes
Right.
and have that work,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to asking him at some point, like, how much deep dive did you do to
Yeah.
soak up the soul that went into that,
Yeah,
but
well, I mean, going back real quick, I was really impressed with Portnoy that he pulled it back so much for that gig. Because,
yeah,
having the tools and the weapons to do all the stuff that he does, and then just backing it off and honoring Ringo. I mean, he would still do mic things and everything like
yeah,
that. It was cool, but it was pretty amazing to see him. You could just tell he was like, I want to, do something,
yeah,
but he just kind of did his thing, and it was pretty amazing. Um, Gregg got a good running jump start because that's all we listened to growing up. We had a little band that my sister and my brother and I we'd play little Beatle guitars when we were like 6 years old and pretend we're the Beatles, like everybody did, right? So
yeah,
every song, we knew every song, and he just loved the Beatles. And then we were in LA and working with Mark Hudson, the producer, and he asked if we wanted to play Ringo and the Roundheads, which was Ringo's solo stuff. When we do all the TV shows, we do Conan and the Tonight Show and all these different things, and we play. And that's when I got to know Ringo and play with the band. And the thing with Gregg is, I mean, what we're talking about honoring your boss. I mean, they're just Gregg and Ringo are just really, really good friends now,
yeah,
and they've been playing together for so long that Ringo kind of needs someone like Gregg to kind of hold it together, because Ringo's singing and fronting the band. He comes back
yeah,
and plays, and he doesn't want to think about tempos. He doesn't want to think about. Gregg's always right on the tempo. And the
yeah,
crazy thing about Ringo too is that when he goes to start a song, he's never thinking about what the tempo is. He'll go in like we would play Matchbox, and he would sing Matchbox at the drums with Gregg and him playing. He wouldn't even think about it. He would just pick up his sticks and go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's way fast.
right, yeah,
But
but
it always sounded amazing because of
yeah,
the swing that you're talking about.
right,
The swing that guy has, it's just different. It's British. It's that
yeah,
thing that we all grew up going, what is that?
yeah. Well,
And
nobody played like it.
no.
Nobody.
And that's
Yeah,
another thing, the same thing we were talking earlier. The people that are saying this stuff about Ringo, or about, he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles, or all that
right,
junk, are
yeah,
people that don't know anything. And it's
yeah,
just another way of people just feeling superior because they can drop a bomb. And I just love, I always play on on Ringo's solo records. And the weirdest thing is that whenever you get around a Beatle, you they call it dorking a Beatle, right? Like if you meet one of your heroes, you just say something stupid because you're so freaked out, right? And I had a friend that met Ringo at a party, and he was so nervous. He goes, Ringo, it's nice to meet you. I love your drumming on Drive My Car. And Ringo goes, that wasn't me. It was the other one, And so he walked away. He was dorked, so he walks away. And like the guy that we always can't stop being, he wanted to go in again and redeem himself. So he goes, I'm sorry I said that, Ringo, but your drumming's amazing, and I loved it on this song. And he goes, well, that wasn't me either. So he dorked him twice in an hour. So you're always thinking, I gotta, everybody, when you're working with him, it's like everybody wants to talk to him about the Beatles and get stories and stuff like that. But I was like reading the room going, I'm never gonna do that unless I just have a moment.
yeah.
And my moment once was we were walking up in New York to do a show, and we were walking behind stage, and sometimes Ringo will just look at you like, go ahead, I know you want to ask me something. So my thing was, I asked him, I go, it was just me and him. We're just about to walk on stage. I go, they're playing the Beatles, and you could hear the bass. And I'm going, how did you ever hear Paul's bass? I mean, you couldn't hear. We saw Greg and I and my mom and dad, my dad went to see the Beatles in 1966, 67, and I couldn't hear anything. It was just screaming. I go, how did you ever hear Paul's bass? And he goes, I never heard his bass. I just watched his ass to find because he couldn't hear anything,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and
Right.
it was just four bros up there playing because they could
Wow.
feel each other. So but then I did a couple albums with him, and the last album that I played with him last year, it was at his house, and I'm showing up at Ringo's house, and there's Barbara. Hey, Barbara, how you doing? And I'm, you just going, what am I doing here? And we start recording the track, and this was the first time Ringo sat right next to me the whole time. It was like an hour to play the bass track. My friend Bruce Sugar was produces him at his house, so he just plucked his chair right next to me, and I didn't feel nervous because I know him a little bit, and he just was just watching me play, and we'd punch in something or whatever, and he was just super super cool, nice. I love that, but there were some things happening with the computer that was like downtime for 10 minutes, and he just started talking to me about Beatles stories. He was bringing them up to me, and I'm like going, I wish I had a phone going right now,
All
because he
right.
was talking about they were in a hotel room once, and this happened with this, and all this crazy stuff, and he just started talking, and I was like, I can't believe I had this hour,
Right.
that I was playing probably about 15 minutes of it, but the rest of it was just Ringo talking.
Mm.
So the thing is with Greg is that he knows the job that he has, the blessing that he has to be in that band, and that band
You
is so
know,
heavy anyway, you know.
I got to tell you, what I really love, Matt, is that you've brought it back to him. I know I said that I'd love to ask him at some point about, capturing that feel, but I love that you sort of even honor the relationship with your brother to talk about what he contributes there. I don't know if you saw like some of the people that are in the chat, like just here on off the YouTube chat. Cornerstone Music says that's the best. Thanks for being an inspiration in music and life. Class act in every respect.
Ah,
Jeremy Burchett on Instagram here says I love Matt's playing with Satriani, the Extremist. Mac McCarthy says Jughead rules. But
wow,
the
wow.
the the really cool thing from the beginning, you're reading and watching your conversations with other people too, is that you make it less about you. And I would think about you got 13 years with Elton John, and you said that it's very Elton like to be able to sort of build up the world and make the world a better place. Your humility is kind of what I'm getting to. I think
Wow.
humility is key, man. And has this been something because we've all had our ass kicked in the gigs, man. I mean, at some point, the industry has, it's thrown us for a loop. Was there a specific moment that sort of brought you to a greater form of humility, or is this something you worked at for a while?
Well, that's really nice of you to say that. I have a lot to be humble for. I mean, we've all got our butts kicked on gigs, and it's
Yeah.
made us better. Years later, you go, that made me better. I remember one time I just went my first year at North Texas, and I thought I was Eddie Gomez on the upright bass, and I thought I was Jocko. And I went back to Detroit to play with this band. And I remember being in this guy's basement, it's four guys, and I got my upright, and we start playing in the basement in the freezing cold, snowy outside basement, and we're playing this song, and it gets to a bass solo on my upright, and I instantly go to like I'm Eddie Gomez playing jazz up at the top of the neck. I close my eyes and I'm playing, and I'm thinking these guys are digging me big time. And all of a sudden, I hear the piano player whose band it was stops comping, and and I'm going, oh, he's digging me so much he wants me to play with the drummer more. And then I hear the sticks go down onto the tom, and I open my eyes, and they're all pissed, looking
Mm.
at me, and I'm like, what's going on? And the keyboard player just goes, you blank 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 disrespected us with this. You thinking that? And he laid into me hard, right?
Wow.
Like, and just saying you weren't listening, you didn't feel the room, you didn't know, and you just thought you just went into glory mode, and I was just freaked out, but I was so young, I mean I was 17,
Oh.
that I kind of listened to him, and like, if I heard that now, I would just go, "Hey, well, thanks, man. I'll see you later. Yeah, take it easy,"
Yeah.
and take my stuff and just walk out.
Right.
But being young and impressionable, which I'm thankful that I was, uh, I played with him the whole winter, and then the whole summer, and then the next summer. And whenever I would play a weird note, his neck would bulge and he would
Ooh.
yell at me and scream at me. But I stayed there and I learned so much. And I didn't like this guy. I mean, it was very, very embarrassing and
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And then I
Drill sergeant.
remember, was that?
Drill sergeant.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
nasty. And I remember I got the gig with Maynard and we played in Detroit and he was there and he was proud of me. He actually was like, because by that time I had, every time I saw the guy, I would freak out. And
Yeah.
even to this day, like if I play with people I don't know and I make a mistakes and I don't really know it, it puts me right back into being 17 years old. So
Yeah.
we've all had that stuff, right? But it's kind of what you do with it to make you a better man. And
Yeah.
the main thing is that uh, is the God factor. I'm a Christian guy, and you have to be humble because that's
Yeah.
the message. You aren't all that. You're saved, and there's nothing that you've done to earn salvation. You've when you have a relationship with Christ, you just kind of you give up on the things that are you think are important. You just put those aside, and
Yeah.
you just get on the train because that's the train I want to be on. So humility, I appreciate you saying that. I wish that I wish that I was like that more. But
Mm.
I mean, we're all full of ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
we got into this thing because the girls. We got in this thing for the glory of music and
Right.
stuff. And and I realized I think the thing I was talking about with being in the band with Dave is I got halfway through with it when I kind of realized this is as far as this thing goes.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
get this coming. And I'm so thankful I never was like an Elton or a Dave or Rick Springfield. I always ask Rick, I go, how do you sleep at night with these girls just like, I love you so much. You're the
Right.
best in the world. How do you stay humble? And he just goes, I just do. For me, that would be too much. It would be too much and I'd lose myself. I know it. So I
Yeah.
know God spared me from being that guy, but I can still play with these guys and kind of be behind the shadow and get paid and do my gig. And that's kind of kept me humble to know that these guys like Elton and Rick and Joe and all these guys, they have that thing, that it thing that a record company would go, that's like when I saw the Dylan movie. He just
Mm.
had something that I don't have. I'm not a rock star. I'm a guy that gets to play with rock stars and I know my place. And I don't want to get away from that place because that's my comfort.
Sure.
And when I do my own music and I have to play and sing, it's like a button that goes on that gets me through it, but it's always uncomfortable because that much attention just fries my brain. It freaks me out.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's a thing that I've learned over the years where I'm supposed to be. So long story.
No, man, I love it. Those are meaningful to me. I think about um, a character like Elton. I went to see U2 at the Sphere earlier this year, and well, this last year, and I'd seen them before, and seeing them in that environment was always it was amazing. My guest yesterday, we talked about I was super surprised as a bass player. Adam Clayton in that band was the rock star of that particular show. I was like, man, I've seen
Yeah.
this band before, and I didn't realize what a magnificent force he was in that band. It
Yeah.
was really fun.
Yeah.
Because Bono is such a dynamic character, and you think, or The Edge, right? But,
Yeah.
but, um, but I think of a Bono out there, guys that'll hate on Bono because of his soapbox. I'm like, well, the dude has probably saved a billion people from famine,
Yeah.
right? So, shame on
Yeah.
him for all of his altruistic duties. But
Yeah.
but guys like Elton too, a lot of people may not know, a lot of his philanthropy and his altruistic stuff. Is there ever time, man, where you and Elton sit down and you just have a conversation about life?
Yeah, yeah, and to your last point, I mean, you look at a band like Chicago, and you think of the whole thing, but then you got Peter Cetera playing, he's
Right.
holding the band together. You
Yeah.
got guys like that, and Paul obviously with the Beatles. I mean, the bass guys, and like Led Zeppelin guy, John Paul Jones, the unsung
Right.
hero, the most amazing musician I think out of the whole band. He's like, who's
Amen.
the bass player? And
Yeah.
but yeah, I had I always when I got into Elton's band, my brother and I always joke like, when is that moment going to come where you're alone in a room with him, and then you have to kind of talk and try and be as cool as him or whoever it
Yeah.
is. I remember my my first story, and I talk about this a lot too. We were backstage probably about the second week into the show, and we're backstage, and nobody's in the room but me, and Elton walks in and sits down right next to me, and he's just looking at me sitting in a chair like, what do you got? He brings something, to talk about something. He doesn't start talking, he's just looking at me. So I'm going, okay, the moment is here. So all day during the sound check, the roadies were going around with their walkie talkies, and they're going, copy that, copy that. Okay, yeah. And I go, okay, I'll just say that. I go, hey, Elton, copy that. I mean, what the heck is that all about? And he looks at me and he takes a breath and he goes, boring. And he walks out. He walks out of the room and doesn't come back. A regular guy would come back and go, I'm just kidding. It's not boring.
Yeah.
I was boring, and he left.
Oh
So
my God.
it was just so funny because he needs to be it needs to be something exciting to talk about with him, because he'll never just talk about the weather or whatever. It has to be the newest thing. We'd get done with the show, we'd do the Beatle, get on the limos, go to the plane, and we're up in the air, and he's working on a crossword puzzle,
Really?
and he's just
Yeah.
going on to the next thing, and he never talks about the gig. Like, hey, that was great, I mean, your pat on the back for that gig is that you show up the next day and you're still there, he's a big boy and he doesn't need to tell you how good you are, but
Yeah.
he's really, really nice, and he
Yeah.
will. But it's that British thing, man. It's
Yeah.
different than us.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But yeah, we've talked. I remember during the we were in Nice, like when all that shooting stuff happened.
Oh
With
yeah.
the that was our hotel that night right there. We had to walk through bodies to get to our room, and I remember
Oh my
going,
God, man.
this is crazy. And I remember we went to his house because he had a house in Nice, and we were all talking around a big table, and everybody was pretty amazingly far left. Imagine a musician being left, but
Right.
I mean they were politically way left, and I'm kind of more in the center, more right, more conservative Christian than they are, and they were just banging on the political thing like that for like an hour, and I was just like, I'm so used to hearing it because that's whatever anybody thinks, and I remember Elton going, okay, hey, you know what, Matt? I'm so sorry about that. We've been talking so much, and I know it probably doesn't sound fun for you. What do you think about this? And I kind of went, that was pretty cool that he would even ask me that, And
Not
it's
pretty.
just like,
That's amazingly cool.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it
Yeah.
was like he'll always look out and see if somebody's not in the party and bring them
Mm.
in, and that's what he does, and yeah. But as far as being alone in a room with him talking about things, I tried to not do that as much as I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah, like, it, I was just thinking, I mean, you playing with Ringo, Elton John, I mean, the biggest names. Is there anybody that is on your radar that if you had an opportunity tomorrow to get that phone call, is there anybody on your list that would check the bucket for you?
I was thinking about that the other day. I was talking to Greg about that, and I don't want to sound prudish or anything like that, but I feel like I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. Obviously, like with Kevin Cronin when calling me to sub for Bruce on the gig, it was
Yeah,
like, and then I find myself playing on stage with REO Speedwagon, and I'm like going, I would have never thought that would be coming, and you don't know what's coming unless it happens.
right.
But I sit around thinking about it, going, I can't really. I mean, I love the way Brian Adams sings. I love that music
Yeah,
and the simple rock, just in your face, and just the sound of his voice. And of course, there's probably tons of people that I'm not even thinking about. But I feel kind of like if anything happened, then I would be up for it. But I can't think of anybody because had an amazingly blessed life. I was
oh
talking
yeah,
to my wife. I'm 63 years old. I didn't even think I'd still be on the road. I didn't think anybody would even want. I mean, one of the things that happened with the Elton gig was we were out on the road like crazy with Rick, and I did Rick's band for like 10 years, and we did some records together and wrote together. and did everything we had to do. And then I was like, I got to do something else for some reason. I just need to. I remember getting on my knees and praying, God, if there's anything out there, I'm up for it. But I just don't want to be. My one request is I don't want to be like Moses in some like Green Day band where I'm this old guy, just like he's the old guy,
Yeah.
And a week later, they called me for the Elton gig, and just
Wow.
and not only that, I was the youngest guy in the band,
No kidding.
So at
Yeah.
55 years old or whatever, or 50 years old.
Yeah.
So exact prayer, that's important. But to answer that question, I mean, that's a good. What about you? What is your bucket list?
Well, um, man, there are a bunch. Honestly, I'm a huge, crazy music fan, and there are somewhat obscure bands that I'm such a fan of that I'll still fly to other countries to go see.
Mm.
There's a band that I feel like it's a crime that they're not bigger. It's called Big Wreck out of Canada.
Oh
That
yeah.
Big Wreck, yeah. So Ian Thornley, that singer, also guitarist, one of the greatest guitarists I've ever seen. I was hip to them back in the 90s, and they just never did it for me until the pandemic. And I got really into their stuff, so much so that to me, it was a new discovery again of
Yeah.
music. I flew to Toronto to go see him. I flew to Denver to go see him. My bandmates are so sick of me talking about how much I love this band. But
I love it.
I think for me, I there are a bunch of artists that I've gotten to know and befriend that I know you'll relate to this. When I was a kid, now I talked about my dad bringing me into music and giving me my first gig. He knew that I was a hard rock guy, right? I was like all into the Scorpions were like my favorite band. And I went to Germany to find them when I was a kid. And
Mm.
he said, I'm going to my dad was a Dixieland jazz player, played sax and
Mm.
played clarinet. And he said, I want to show you some different music. So he took me to see Chariya acoustic band,
There you
John
go.
Patitucci on bass. And you had Weckl on drums. It was at this theater in Montana, and my mind was blown. And I ran backstage. I pushed past security, got backstage to go talk to Dave Weckl. And I said,
Mm.
I have no idea what that was that I just saw. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
What was that about? And we talked for a little bit. And Patitucci comes over and he's like, he sees this wide-eyed, long mullet-haired rocker guy. And Dave goes, you know what, man? This is the wrong conversation to have in this place right now. This is where we're staying. Come meet me at the lounge and we'll go hang
Wow.
out and talk. My dad talked his way to come back and get me. And my dad sat at the table next to us. And Dave sat and talked to me for like 2 hours he said, do you party? And I said, no. And I thought he was asking me if I wanted to like get high.
Right.
And I said, no, man, I don't even drink. And he goes, good. Because if you want to get to this age, you want to be in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you want to do this for a living, there's no way you can manage that if you're still going off and doing what a lot of guys your age are doing.
Yeah.
And I took it to heart.
Yeah.
Dave ended up writing me a letter. I still have it framed. It changed my life and just my perspective on, success and these bands. And so even though I revered all these bands and had, the Beatles, sort of, as, the top tier of these things that inspired me, I also saw that guys that inspired me could be real and authentic. Years later, Dave Abbruzzese from Pearl Jam became a dear friend of mine and showed me, wow, at that point, we were with him when he got his first big check when the band was taking off. We went out and bought a car with him and watched his house and watched how he stayed so humble at the height of their popularity. And I could see that even though the aspirations of the success and the glory and the money and all the other fame and everything those were still like high on my priority list. I loved that you could stay humble and you could stay true to yourself and not buy into what you might see on MTV, And
Yeah.
so I have a million artists that I would love to play with. I watch my friends, that have gotten to play with McCartney, and they say, yeah, this is the greatest thing is that, he's playing with one of the greatest all time ever musicians, and certainly in rock and roll. And yet he's humble and real and fun. I think about Ringo and I watch his personality and I think that's not all show. That looks to me very authentic.
Oh, yeah.
That dude is as fun and joyful as you could get off stage as he is on,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
when I talked about your humility, I could see gratitude in
Mm.
everything that you put forth. And I
Ah.
think it's key, man. I think that when these people here in the chat and they're talking about how inspiring you are, a lot of that is because you express gratitude and you bring that sort of, you bridge, the success and everything and make that sort of attainable for us common musicians, man. So
Well,
it's true.
I am no more common. I am common as most common can be. And I appreciate you saying that's really nice of you to say that. I mean, I think everybody has to come to their moment with when things get handed to you, and when you do get to play with your heroes, that no matter who they are, after a certain point you go, they're just like me and they're just
Yeah.
like anybody else, and I kind of don't want to do this anymore, or I'm bored with this gig, I want to do something else.
Yeah.
There's no gold in those hills, and any musician, if I could say anything, would be, if you're working so hard to get someplace that you think you need to get to, that you sacrifice the most important things on the way to that. And then when you get that, it vanishes. It more than likely will vanish. And it's not real. It's like a mirage. It's this thing that we train ourselves to do. We just think we have to get that. And that's what's so hard about guys that are older now that have written a lot of hit songs. That drive to write a number one hit song, it never goes away. It's almost
Right.
like a dissatisfied existence in a way.
Sure.
And that's some lonely stuff, man. I mean, because
Yeah.
you will not stay on top, and you will be replaced by the next thing. Nothing new under the sun, all that stuff. So, and I just think on the road to where we're trying to get to realize that that's really an unattainable success, happiness thing. I mean, like peace isn't something that, like happiness is something that you get when you buy your car.
Yeah.
You get this car you've always wanted, but then you smash it, and then you're not happy anymore. But then
Yeah.
they're going to fix it with insurance. I'm happy again. It's a fluctuating thing. But peace, like inner peace, and just
Yeah.
knowing where you're going, kind of nullifies all that stuff, because no matter what happens in that storm, and there will be storms, you just kind of look around and go, what am I going to do about this? And
Yeah.
we all have to get our butts kicked by musicians and getting yelled at and stars thrown at you and stuff. And just this long, it's just this long road to wherever we are now, wherever that is.
This story of throwing stars like chucked at you and sticking your bass strap is
When I
still.
see you in person someday, I'm going to bring a star and I'm going to whip it.
Yeah. Well, you might see me this weekend. Are you going to be at the NAMM show?
You know what? We're going out to play in New Orleans this weekend. We're leaving tomorrow morning. So
this is with Kevin Cronin.
Yeah, we're doing a corporate gig or something out there. So, but,
good man.
You're going to be here though, man. I'll be like, I would be able to see you from my house.
I know. I'm sad, man, because I would have loved to pop in and check out that studio there. But
oh, man.
I'm down there a lot. We I think we usually end up doing the Grove there. For those shows. I think this summer, I know we're at the Greek. Oh, you know what? I'm going to tell you a story about the Greek. I've shared this on the show, but my singer hates this. We did a show the night after Ringo's All-Star Band at the Greek a few years ago. And we were blessed to be the headlining spot on this gig. So we were in the main dressing room, and the promoter came in and he goes, "Oh, you know what, man? Ringo was in that seat where you were in right there last night." And I got a little goosebump moment, right? And I'm like, "Oh my God, okay." And I'm checking out the room and the wall. You played the Greek before? Okay. So that main room, but there's a glass panel that has all the consoles with like the radio and the stereo equipment and everything. There's one of those panels that has a stairwell that goes up into the ceiling in the skylight. So I climbed up the ladder, and I popped, and the skylight popped open, and I'm live streaming, walking. You can actually shimmy on the roof of the Greek all the way down to look out over the stage. And it was stupid because, I mean, it's slick tile. It easily could have fallen off, a couple hundred feet. I mean, it's a pretty rock and roll way to go out, I suppose, if you're going to go, right? But
could be worse.
But the rest of the bands on the bill, I was telling them, oh man, I mean, what an amazing experience, to be able to get the Greek from this spot. So the next year we went back, and I set it all up, and I did like a little Facebook Live, and I said, all right, so guys, we're going to go and we're going to record this live stream, and I go up through the skylight. We're going to go out and we're going to watch the opening acts. And I go up, and boop, they had locked the skylight. And I was like, damn it. And I'm live, so I look like a fool, but
well, Well, you'll
But
always have that up here. It'll all
that's
be
right,
there.
man. That's a good one. But we're back there a bunch, and I would love, to be able to just kick it. I'm very appreciative, first of all, that your family shared you with me for a couple of
Oh,
hours here, and
they're tired of
yeah,
me. They want me to get out of here. So, but
well, you're
I
gonna
got
get
a
out of there
feeling
tomorrow.
you and I are gonna be pals for a long time. I got a feeling.
I would really love that, man. I would love to come and see you do the Cronin gig.
Yeah.
Go see our mutual buddy Todd Zuckerman on drums at the Styx gig, and
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
I thought I saw something on the schedule for Bozeman, but maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. But I'll
well,
check
I'll
it.
meet you in Bozeman, but I know you're playing Portland. You're playing the Ridgefield,
Oh, yeah,
the
that's
big
right. Well, I kept thinking that you were back there. Oh, yeah, Portland. I'm sure we'll be up in Portland.
Yeah, yeah. There is
Oh,
something. If a flock of seagulls is not gigging, I'm coming out to see you. I'm not bringing any throwing stars. No, I'll be, I'll be just singing your praises. We'll do some
maybe just a little dart, just right here.
duct tape. I'll throw you some flock of seagulls guitar picks.
I love Flock of Seagulls, man. I love Flock of Seagulls. What a great
I'm
band.
grateful, man. There's a brand new record, first record out in 29 years that just came
No
out. And
way.
yeah, so we'll be doing plenty of touring off that. It's fun, but
Very
it's
good.
been
Very
busy.
good, man.
I'm
Good.
grateful. So Matt
Yeah.
Bissonette, dude, this has been just a delight. I've really
Thanks
appreciate
for
your
having
time.
me. I
And
appreciate you even looking me up, and it's cool to talk to you.
yeah, it really is to you too, man. I look forward to this. Guys, if you got here late, do me a favor, go back and check this out from the drop of the needle, man. Like Matt has just amazing stories, great historical stuff, but more importantly than all those stories, I really feel like you got to know somebody that is truly grateful and humble in this business. It's a rare thing, but we need more of that in today's
Yeah.
society and in our business. So keep that path going. Not you, Matt. You already. I know this is you for the rest of your life. But people, if you can derive any inspiration from that, just be good humans. That's
Yeah.
good to each other. Right?
Good humans. Amen.
Right
All
on.
right.
Thank you
Great
guys so
seeing
much.
you, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Folks, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and then come back for a brand new Tommy Two Tone episode, brand new record from him next week. So youtube.com/@accesskevin.